Welcome. This video presentation will walk you through the soundboard layout for the First Baptist Church of Round Rock. We have two X32 digital soundboards that have 32 mic preamps as inputs, as well as 6 TRS line inputs and 6 TRS line outputs. There are also 16 XLR outputs used for amplifier to go out to the main speakers in the house, stage monitors, and other various purposes. The X32 soundboard has 25 mix buses, of which, driven from the main left-right and the subwoofer from the house, 6 plus matrices, 16 mix buses, and each of those, as I understand, have 6-band parametric EQ and dynamics processing. On the back of each console, there are 2 AES-50 ports that allow for digital communication to an S32 Snake, which allows us to have stage inputs, as well as communication to the second console itself that's used to mix video for services and posting online and whatnot. Last but not least, there are 32 by 32 USB Firewire recording interfaces with digital audio workstation control, 8 stereo effects slots for 40 plus effects plugins, and there are 16 assignable outputs for use with a P16 personal monitoring system via an alternate Ethernet port on the back of each of the consoles. Here's an example of individual channels on the board layout. The first fader bank includes 16 faders. There will be 4 buttons on the left-hand side of the X32 console, comprising bank 1, which is faders 1 through 16, bank or page 2, if you want to term it that way, for faders 17 through 32, aux channels on the third bank, and then bus master for the fourth bank. You see we have vocal mics, all spoken and vocal mics on the first fader bank. On the second, we have all of our instruments. And then we have something called DCA groups, which is going to be on the right-hand section of the console. We'll get into that a little bit later. That's simply to control volume for a group of channels on the actual board itself. We're going to talk a little bit about channels and buses. What is a channel? What is a bus? A channel is just a signal that you're getting from the source. It might be from the back of the soundboard inputs. It might also be from the S32 digital Snake. From a perspective of the second console, it can come from the other console that's actually doing the live mixing in the house as well. So there's a number of different ways you can get into those channels, but we're talking about sending a group of channels to a bus, a mix bus. And what a mix bus allows you to do is apply further EQ, dynamics and processing, contouring of the sound, if you will, to make it sound better and provide more control over it. So again, just as that individual vocal red mic, the individual choir mic, and individual choir or kick drum, I should say, these are all eventually going to go into their own respective bus, and then it's going to be sent out to the overall mix in the house. So you see how these colors are lining up. We have a number of different vocal wireless microphones as an example on the vocal bus. We're going to have individual choir mics, 4 of them I believe, eventually on just a choir bus, and then the drums can have any number of microphones on it, and then of course the band, bass, guitar, anything but the drums on its own separate bus. Okay. The mix buses themselves are then going to be sent to another larger bus simply called the left-right mix. And that left-right mix traditionally is what goes out to the speakers in the house. However, we have it set up a little bit differently here, again, to get the utmost use of the sound and take advantage of those EQ filters as well as compression and dynamics processing. We're sending the overall left-right mix bus then to matrices 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we can have EQ on the individual channel, on the individual mix bus itself, on the left-right mix bus, and then again on the matrix 1 through 3. That can really allow us to have a tremendous amount of power over frequency problems and feedback problems. So if we can figure out how to use these effectively, it can really provide a higher quality sound. You'll notice here that we're doing a crossover EQ from the left-right mix to the matrices 1 through 3. These are what are assigned to the physical outputs going out to the speakers in the house. and the left-right stereo speakers are blocking out the lower frequencies. Now there's a crossover actually built into the main sanctuary speakers as well, so that's not something that we necessarily need to do in the sanctuary, but it might be nice to take some of the burden of that processing off of those speaker sets up there that actually do that, if we can send this more cleanly straight from the console. So again, it's a feature. It's there. If it's there, we might as well use it and try it. And if it works well, we'll continue. And if it's not, then we won't. But conversely, we have the mid to high frequencies blocked on Matrix 3, which is dedicated for the subwoofer speakers, and allowing the lower frequencies to pass through. Now, taking a pause here, we're going to walk through the routing configuration. And this is just to simply illustrate, when you get a sound signal from whatever source, how is it routed through the actual board itself? Where does it end up, and how is it transported, and how is it named, and all that jazz? So we're going to walk through that. Simply put, if you go to the screen on the console, there's a series of buttons on the right-hand side of the screen. And if you press the routing button, you'll see something that looks a little bit like this pop up. Now, these are screenshots from the X32 Edit app, so the labeling is a little bit different. But the input section actually will be reflected on the console as home. So if you think of home, just think of it as inputs, and it's just a better way to term it. We have source. Where are we deriving the sound signal from? And then we have channel, or fader. What fader are we assigning that sound signal to? So local, if you just kind of strike that and just think of X32 Soundboard, those are the inputs on the back of the board. Inputs 1 through 8 and 9 through 16 are going to be assigned to faders 1 through 8 and 9 through 16 on the Surface console. Then over here you have this AES50A. Just think digital snake. Kind of scratch that out and just think this is the S32 digital snake. And inputs 17 through 32 on that digital snake, we're going to assign to faders 17 through 32 on the console. Okay? That's all you need to know about that. Now, moving on, talking about that digital snake and how we transport that sound to and from the S32 is important. First off, the AES50 A and B ports, we're only going to talk about the A port for now. Okay? Each port can transmit up to 96 signal paths, 48 signal paths bidirectionally. That means the console itself sends 48 signal paths to the snake, and then the snake in turn sends 48 signal paths back to the console. The first 16 signal paths are always going to be dedicated to the outputs. 48 is a logical number because, sorry, I shouldn't say logical, it's a number that makes sense because you have 32 inputs and you have 16 outputs. If you add those together, you get 48. So what we're saying is we're not only transmitting signal paths down this Cat6 Ethernet cable for the inputs that we're getting from the console, but also the outputs. And so it's important to recognize that. So outputs 1 through 16 that the X32 soundboard is managing are going to be assigned a logical name. When I say logical, I mean it's just an arbitrary name so that we can reference it later. AES50 1 through 16. Okay? So then what do we do with the inputs that are coming in from the back of the board? Those are, again, the local here. Just think X32 inputs when you see local here. Inputs 1 through 16, we're going to assign the logical names AES50 17 through 32. Now, the AES50 source, again, where is this coming from? It's coming from the snake, the S32. Just cross that out and think this is the S32 inputs 17 through 32 are going to be assigned the logical name, or again, arbitrary name, AES50 33 through 48. So this is intelligently transmitted back and forth between the console and the snake because we're assigning specific signal paths to these specific logical and individual names. The AES-B port is typically going to mirror the A port when we're talking about the sanctuary console, which we are here. This might change a little bit if you're the recipient of this information, but more often than not, they're going to be more or less mirrored. Now, moving on to the last screenshot here. This is our XLR outputs. These are the physical outputs that the board is managing. We want to say, hey, where are these outputs that the board is managing? Well, we have, again, local, but you'll notice this is 1 through 32. So we need to scratch that right away because, again, as up here, these are the actual inputs on the board. These have nothing to do with outputs, so you would never, ever select anything there. I don't know why they include it, but just scratch that out. Now, the AES-50, this is where it can be a little bit tricky, okay? Remember those first 16 outputs that we assigned to logical names 1 through 16 on the AES signal path, right? So there again, we're going to go ahead and call those up. Those first 8 outputs, but actually on the digital snake itself, again up here, cross out the AES-50A and just think S32 digital snake. Go down and apply the same logic. The AES-50A becomes S32 digital snake. The outputs on that snake, 1 through 8, are then going to be the outputs that we are going to manage through the console, 1 through 8. Now the other 8 outputs are going to be local to the X32 system board. So just like we said, local up here, we changed that to X32 for the inputs. We're going to do the same on the outputs up here. X32 outs are going to be used 9 through 16. And the reason being is that in the sanctuary, we're going to obviously send the main left-right outs to the subwoofer to the amplifier. The large speakers that power the sanctuary aren't powered at all. In fact, that's why they need to have an amplifier. So at least not enough to get the sound signal out the way they're supposed to. So this is the XLR outputs portion. And these all combined together provide a great way to, again, manage the sound, manage it digitally with minimal cabling, and get it out to the actual speakers in the house with a nice clean sound. Here is the detailed signal flow. I'm not going to go into this too much, but just know this is the sanctuary soundboard right here. The AES-50 A and B ports are used. The B port is used to connect the studio or the video soundboard, which is in a different room. The A port on the soundboard is used to connect to the S32 snake. And the S32 snake can output to powered monitors only. But again, if you're talking about the speakers in the house, those need an amplifier. So you need to take a straight shot from the soundboard over to amp, and then the amp sends that amplified signal out to the speakers. There's an Ultranet Ethernet port on the back of the S32 digital snake. You can plug that into a P16 distribution point, and people can manage their own channels and mix as they want, up to 16 channels, that is. Here's an example of a layout. Again, won't beat this to death, but label description, the physical input. What's the physical input label number on the back of either the X32 sound console itself or the S32 snake? Is there a fader number that is specifically assigned to? Is it included in a DCA group or not? Is it a mixed bus member? What's the output destination? And then just remember the mixed buses ultimately feed out into the left-right mix into the matrices and then to the house. Auto mix, we don't need to get into that, but it just automatically balances. If there's 3 mics that are trying to be spoken at once, it'll decrease one group and increase the level of another group so that the primary speaker can always be heard. The personal monitor and mixing P16, again, just walk through that. Recommended layout for the 16 channels so that when they're received on that P16 mixing station, then the instrumentalist or vocalist or whomever can turn certain P16 channels up or down as they see fit so they can get the mix that they want. Example of our stage layout in the gym. We, of course, have the left-right speakers on the left and right. We have mics throughout on the stage, on the choir. We have digital input boxes necessary for the keyboards because the keyboards have a TRS quarter-inch line which need to be converted to XLR while maintaining the integrity of the sound and the power. So that's what those DA boxes are designed to do. P16 stations, again, nothing set in stone here, just conceptually this is how we see it laying out. And then last but not least, source reference information. So if you want to see videos of people actually working on the console itself, if you don't have the PowerPoint deck here, you can just Google these, Behringer X32 dashboard setup, and you'll be able to see those videos. Okay, let's go ahead and take a pause here and go over to our X32 Edit app, which you can download from the Behringer website, from a Google Play Store or an iTunes Apple Store on your iPad device. And what that allows us to do is actually lay out the soundboard conceptually, save it to a USB key, and that way when we get to the soundboard itself, we don't have to slave away on the individual channels on each of the soundboard. We can do this while we're at home, watching TV or whatnot, and then save it as a scene to a USB key, and then go to the console, stick in the USB key, and then restore from that scene, and then it'll change all of these faders and all of these different parts of the soundboard to the same way as you have them set up in the X32 Edit app. You can also sync this app to the actual console itself. You may not want to do that. You may want to do that. Just depends on how you like to be mobile, walking around the sanctuary of the room, and doing some tweaks here and there. So going through the individual channels here, we take a look at the individual channels. We can just select them, and then based on that, we can move faders up or down, which will physically move if you're synced up to the console, physically move those faders up or down on the console itself. But we're going to walk through some of the features of the console by using the X32 app here now. If you click on the channel itself, by selecting a channel, you see that you can create a stereo link between two specific channels. The purpose of this might be like a CD. So if you go over here to the CD left, CD right, you see that they're linked together. That way if I move one fader and only move one fader, don't try to move both at the same time, they're motorized so that if I move the one on the left, the one on the right always moves with it to match it. Going back to the vocal mic here, we can put phantom of 48 volt power. You really wouldn't do this on a wireless vocal mic, but maybe a wired mic like a condenser microphone, that would make sense. We can reverse polarity, which would make sense if you're miking a snare drum top and bottom, or perhaps you have two microphones really close together for whatever reason and you just need to reverse the polarity on one of them. You can insert effects, which is nice. You typically want to do that post-fade, so let's say you want to put a little hall reverb on it, then you can insert that post-fade. If you highlight that, then you're actually inserting it pre-fade. You don't want to do that, so just deselect it, and that way the effects are going in the post-fade manner. You can add a noise gate, which is really, really cool, specifically for drum microphones, like a bass or a kick drum microphone. You might want to put a gate on that and increase the threshold. Purpose being is that you don't want to hear room noise. You may not want to hear the drummer kind of twitching on that bass pedal a little bit, causing the metal to click around. But you want to hear the big thud. So once a big thud happens, then let the rest of the sound go through, as an example. So anything that goes beyond this threshold, then we're going to turn the mic on. Anything that doesn't meet this threshold, then the mic is in essence turned off. Again, lit means it's active and on. When it's not lit, it's deactivated, it's not on. Equalizer is cool here. I'm going to go over to the actual EQ itself, and it's a lot more illustrative if we do that. We have a low cut and then 4 EQ filters, which is really nice. We also have RTA, which shows you the visual representation of the sound coming through the microphone itself, or the instrument perhaps. And what's nice about that is that, especially with microphone issues, if you have frequency problems, you can typically see those right away. It can help level things out, which gives you a nice, more clean, quality, leveled out type of a sound, if that's what you're going for, which in most cases we are. Back to the config section. If we go to the DYN, that's the same thing as the compressor. And so with the channel, the compressor is going to say, okay, anything over volume-wise, over this threshold, we are going to reduce that volume by a certain amount. So if we go over here to the DYN, we can see this illustrated, and this is what's so cool about this, we never had this in the soundboard. We can actually conceptually see what it is that we're doing. We set our threshold here. We can set our ratio at 2 to 1. So let's say anything that goes over 30 decibels is then reduced in half. So if I have a 40 decibel sound, the sound that goes over 30, that's the 10 decibels. Additionally, over 30, that's going to get reduced to 5. Okay, so 10 divided by 2 is 5. And then if you move this up to 3 or 4, then it's a third or a fourth, etc. So really, really cool tool to use if you have a a singer or even an instrument that's really dynamic. The range is really, really problematic to deal with from a volume level standpoint. Causing some clipping, can really help you rein that in, but still make it sound natural. And in order to make it sound natural, you want to pay attention to the attack, hold, and release times. So just set those as you need to. I won't get into when to use these, but just move them up or down as you see fit, and then you can kind of see visually, when you increase or decrease one of those. Moving over to the sends, this is what we're sending this individual channel to. We're going to send all of the singing microphones into a vocal bus. So you see that's why that's raised up here. We're also sending this specific microphone into a monitor send. So you can manage this from the mix bus itself if you want to, and just hit sends to fader by calling up that specific mix bus. So I might be over here in the stage monitor, and then hit a little button on the top right below the digital screen that says sends to fader. And when you do that, it'll light up all the individual channels. So if you go up here, I selected the sends to fader mode on the X32 Edit app. You see that they're all highlighted. But when I deselect it and I hit the sends to fader button to turn it off, then they all go back to normal. Okay. We can also send these to their respective buses at pre or post fader. So we want to send this as a post fade so that we can control the volume. And then the monitor mix, we might want to send that pre fader. So if they want to be able to control specific volume, they can. But more importantly, that's like in a P16 mixing situation, I guess. But point being is that you have them in a certain level in the monitors. Okay, when you hit send to fader, you have them at a certain level. So what you don't want is that when you're out of sends to fader mode, and let's say you want to bring up the red mic a little bit in the house, well, by doing so, if it's post fader and you bring him up to here, then that's also going to bring him up in the monitor and cause a significant amount of feedback, especially if that microphone is right next to the monitor. So you want to leave that alone. You want to only bring it up in the house, but not in that specific person's monitor. So that's why we want to send that as either post EQ or post fader. I'm sorry, pre fader. Okay. So that's pretty much it on the individual channels. You'll see here that we can assign them to DCA groups, and that is the volume control. That's really what it is. So quickly, if you need to bring down all the vocals, the choir, drums, and the rest of the band, because the speakers are coming on, instead of having to mute or worse, turn all those faders down, you never want to do that because then you never get your mix back the way you want it. But you can just simply slide these faders down or just mute, 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 mute. You're muting 4 of them at a time. They're all right there. Take your 4 fingers, hit the mutes, and then raise up the spoken mic, either the pastor, unmute him, or you can, I should take them up there, or unmute the brown one, which is going to be used for the praying for the pastor or announcements, which we do in between worship songs. Okay. Nothing else there. Effects, you can set those as you wish. They are showing here up on buses 13 through 16. So if you go back to the bus master, you'll see here we have matrices, but we have effects 1, 2, 3, 4. This is where you can control the volume. We don't have them muted. We have them set at unity because we have, again, a DCA group specifically for the effects. So once you get the effects on there at the desired manner, then you can go ahead and raise them up and raise them down, unmute them or mute them as you see fit, and you're all set there. Just click on the drop downs here, or there's knobs actually on the console itself. You can go through some of those. A couple things on the console itself as far as setup you should be aware of. Hitting the setup button, again, which is on the right-hand portion of the digital screen, you want to go ahead and make sure that you are sample rate at 48 kilohertz. Do not change this. Thou shalt not change this, right? Synchronization as well. For the X32 board in the Sanctuary Gymnasium, this is the master board, simply meaning is that it's giving the time to the digital snake, the S32 that it's syncing with, which is an important part of how it works operationally, as well as the secondary console for mixing video. We have this set to scenes so we can save and restore to scenes. And nothing more here. Take a look at the monitor. This is really cool because you can actually not only listen to solo, but you hit this button, select follow solo. So every time you solo an individual channel, it'll automatically select it for you. So if you need to up the gain a little bit, or if you need to, do an EQ, you're not accidentally EQing the last channel that you had selected. It's actively and automatically selecting that channel every time you hit solo. So that's really cool. Talkback A and B is something we've never had before. That's could be pretty awesome, depending on whether or not you like shouting from the soundboard to the stage directions and trying to vice versa hear those directions. Make it much more discreet. So hit and hold the Talkback A button, and that will only feed your voice through a microphone that's right underneath the digital screen on the console. It'll transmit your voice directly to mix 10, 11, 12, which is going out to the monitors on the stage as we have them. If you want to make a public service announcement to the house, you can do that as well. Somebody left their lights on or whatnot, then hold the, not hold, but press the Talkback B button, and then that will make your voice carry out to the main left, rights in the house. It's important as well when you're being discreet and talking with someone on stage, right? You can actually mute their specific mic, but you can solo their mic at the same time. So they can actually be talking into their mic and giving you directions. It's just like when you have your earphones on, they're talking right to you. You've muted their line so they're not going out to the house, and then when you hold that Talkback A button down, you're able to communicate through them, and your voice is being carried through to the monitors that's ideally fairly close to their microphone. So pretty cool. Oscillators for pinking the room, we won't get into that, but again, that's there. And last but not least, really cool and important, being able to save and manage scenes. Scenes is when we have all of our settings. You see all the scene states listed here. You can have those saved to a USB key or to the console itself. So let's say you make a change, and at the end of the show, you just want to get it back to last known good values, then just call up the scene and then restore. Or let's say that there's been a major change in a specific monitor send or gain control or whatnot, and save that as an individual scene. We typically are going to have an 8:30 a.m. service scene and then a 9:45, 11 a.m. service scene. So they'll be individually. Right now, we just have the board layout collectively for all services considered. So again, anticipating changes, but this is how we would organize those changes so that we can call up specific settings that we need on the red mic, as an example. The vocal EQ and compression is probably going to be much different for the 8:30 service than it would be on the 9:45 service on the red mic here. So that being said, thank you for your time. Just wanted to walk through a little bit about how the sound is laid out on these new X32 soundboards. And if you're part of the audio team or any part of the church involved in video audio, we really appreciate your service. It's a service to the Lord. We want to set up the soundboard and the sound in such a way that's providing clear, concise, and consistent sound for the purpose of worship and glorifying His name that's free of distraction. And so everything that we're doing is striving towards that. So thank you.